She didn't make a single shot in the game. She did not score a single point. And mom and dad are walking out of that gym thinking she scored 7 points. Now you might think, oh, that's harmless. Of course, parents are going to just have their rose colored glasses on. But I recognize this is a crazy parent. This person is not grounded in reality. So I kept that story in my back pocket. And when something later in the season started to percolate a little bit with that family, you better believe my first story to the AD was, you're not going to believe this, but I went to this AAU tournament, dot, 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 because I want him to have that as his first impression rather than the mom that comes and says, coach is not giving my kid a fair shake. She's so good in the summer and now she doesn't get any opportunity. Like, I don't want him responding to that. I want to frame in as much reality as possible anything that I see that could be on sort of the parent landscape, parent radar, so that the AD is not caught off guard or put on the defensive before I have a chance to communicate first. Kurt, I'm going to try to go through the rest of this pretty quickly here. There's a link at the start of the slideshow, and you can share that maybe in the email that you guys can take a look at some of the rest of this stuff here. I've got some practical advice, and I've kind of couched it into 3 categories here when it comes to thinking about what do you want the role of your parents to be in your program, and how much time and effort are you willing to put in to invest in your parent community? And again, that answer is different for everybody, okay? So here are the 3 categories I'm going to walk through quickly. Number 1, maybe just an informed parent community, meaning that I'm going to share information as quickly as I can, as accurately as I can, so that you understand not only what's going on, and by the way, if you want to avoid as many pitfalls as possible, make sure your bus times are accurate and make sure that the practice schedule doesn't change last minute and make sure that, kids know what color they're supposed to wear for the pictures and that sort of thing. You got to get the logistics right to build some credibility, okay? But even explaining, here's what we're doing and why. We're not having a conversation. I'm just letting you know, these are the things that we believe in and this is how we're going to move forward. I'm trying to give information to the parents so that they can be informed. Now, a second place that you might land is, I want the parents to be involved in the program or involved in the culture. I want them to participate in building rapport and building relationships and feeling like they have a part of it. And I would approach it differently if that's what I wanted. And then third, I sort of referenced this all the way at the beginning, is if you say, look, I want to have a positive impact on the parent community as well, that's an entirely different question. It takes a little more courage. It takes a lot more effort. You got to put yourself out there a little bit. But I do think that it can have a profound impact on some of those people that are walking into the room or some of those people that are bringing some baggage in. I think as coaches with some intention, we can have a transformational effect on parents too. So let's talk quickly about what these things might look like. An informed parent would understand from our parent meeting some of the common pain points that parents might experience. Or I think about this as, what are some things that parents might ask me about that they don't understand? Okay, so one of the things that we'll talk about is we work really hard to ground expectations for our season. Even this year, we're preseason number 2. We were semifinalists at the state tournament last year. We bring 4 starters back. We got a stud freshman coming in. We're still trying to keep expectations for our team rooted a little bit in the mystery of how good could we be. If you think your team's going to be lucky to be 500, I don't know if I would say it that way, but I do think it's important that you communicate in some way, hey, there's a lot for us to learn this year. We got a lot of players in different roles, and we're going to try some different things schematically, and man, the league's really tough. We always put a list of the preseason ranked players up in our preseason parent meeting so they can understand, like, we might not run the table here, because we're playing good teams out there too. So I'm doing my best to ground some expectations right from the start. We'll talk about how we choose captains because we don't do it based on who's a senior or who the best players are. And we have a whole process for that, but that's new to parents and it's different. And it does result in seniors not becoming captains. If you can imagine back to my situation with the senior at Springville, if we hadn't talked about that, mom probably would have been even more upset if she didn't understand kind of the process that we were using. If you have a season where the line between JV and varsity is a little bit blurred, or you're sharing kids or counting quarters, you need to talk about it. And like this year for us, we were really, really intentional about saying the kids that are outside the varsity rotation that are playing JV, we're going to make sure that they're playing 4 quarters of JV every night, because the worst thing that could happen is that they sit and watch other people play and get better. Well, that means that they might not get in as many varsity games. It means that there might be some freshmen that aren't playing as much on our JV level. We're only playing 2 teams this year. I recognize that. And so I'm explaining this is why we're going to do it this way, and this is what it's going to look like. We'll talk a little bit about the program in general, like give them a glimpse of kind of how the youth program is built and the connections we're trying to make there. This sounds like a silly thing, but I talk to them about how I use social media. Like we had some pushback at Linmar sometimes about when we would post the score of our game and why didn't my daughter get because she had 8 points and why wasn't she on the Twitter and stuff like that that seems so silly to us. So we talk about it and I say, look, I get 280 characters to give Jeff Linder a summary of the game. That's all I'm trying to do. That's all the purpose of this is to notify Jeff about the score and maybe a sentence or two about how the game went. So don't expect every kid that scores or has a career high or, has a double-double that they're going to get in the tweet because I only have so many characters. Again, it seems like a dumb thing, but just making sure the parents know what to expect, it helps, okay? It helps a little bit. Now, another thing that we've committed to when it comes to having informed parents is the weekly email. This is probably the most important thing that I do all week, and I spend a couple hours on it every Monday morning. The weekly email for us includes all kinds of things, but there's going to be announcements and reminders. If a bus time has changed, if a schedule has changed, if there's a reminder about t-shirt orders, something like that. There's some nuts and bolts to it. We'll have at the very end of the email, the most updated schedule of the coming week is going to be in there. We've started doing a segment that's called Last Week at a Glance. So I'll write a paragraph about each game that we played the week before. What did I see that we did well? What were we trying to do better? What did we learn from that game? Like there was a game last year we lost to my good friend Brian Wheatley, who exposed something in our zone when we played North Lynn. And so I literally in the email said, I didn't have a solution for that, but I'm glad we played this game now because if we see it in the postseason, we'll be better prepared. So I'm framing that, taking some responsibility for it. I'm helping parents to be able to process that loss that was disappointing for them. I think that's important. I'll also have a section in the email called a look at this week's opponents. Again, part of grounding expectations. Every team that I write about sounds like the best team in the state. If they scored 40 points for the first time all year in their last game, you better believe that's going to be the headline. We had a team, we played South Tama that just broke a 46-game losing streak, and they won 2 games before we played them. You better believe they're hearing about how that program's being turned around and they're not what they were. And maybe parents sort of chuckle at some of that. But again, I'm trying to get them to the point where, look, other coaches and players are trying to work hard here too. And there are challenges with each team and each program and each scout that they may not necessarily appreciate. So I include that. We put links to media. If KCRG was here covering the game, we'll put that in, easy for them to find. Links to the stats, links to the rankings. We'll talk about little culture moments. If there's something where, our bench went crazy on a particular play and it was awesome, we'll talk about that. Sometimes we share scouting reports. Sometimes we share, like there was a possession in our game last night where I thought, this is who we are. It was like 6 passes that led to a wide open layup. I'm like, that's who we want to be. This is what we're striving for. I might include that in the weekly email. Parents know to expect it. And I think it's probably, like I said, one of the most important things that comes out of it. One more thing just to add to this, I know we're pinched for time here, is that I will also send an email to our entire district that allows them to sign up for the girls basketball weekly email. So if you have teachers, we have teachers in all the buildings that are signed up that get the updates. All the links to how to watch the games online are in there, as well. Game start times, all that stuff. So it's an easy way for them to follow our team. And what we've seen as a result of that, especially as we're building here at Mount Vernon, is our teachers have taken more interest in our team. And our kids would say, I have more teachers that are asking me about the game last night or the upcoming game because they read your email. So it's a great way to just generate a little bit more interest as well. All right, last couple here, involved parents. Again, just thinking about how can we get parents more involved in participating in the culture. I could go through these and we don't have a lot of time here, but we at our parent meeting will provide opportunities for players and parents to connect with each other. Like we did speed dating at our parent meeting here this year where all the players lined up on one side, all the parents lined up on the other. And for 60 seconds, I would give them a question. They would both answer, and then they would rotate to the next person. So parents that don't know all the players are answering questions about what their childhood was like or what their favorite vacation might be or what's their favorite basketball memory. But we're trying to build opportunities for parents to connect. We have a coach in our mentorship program at Thrive on Challenge that does Blue Streak Trivia Night every year. The parents come in, they do a meal, and they do it like a trivia night, but it's all about boys basketball trivia at their high school, and it's a big hit, big social event around the program. The players serve the meal. Great. Okay. We do a player-led practice every year where the parents come in. You can see the picture here in their sweats, and the players lead them through some of our favorite games and drills. It's just a way for them to participate a little bit more. Now, here's another piece here that we will talk about with parents, and this is a slide right out of our slideshow, which is the 3 asks of Mount Vernon parents. So our core values are gratitude, effort, and love. So we'll talk about what does gratitude look like from the parent perspective. It's not the same as a player. It's not the same as a coach. It means being grateful for our officials or for our coaches or for our administrators, for our scorebook keepers, for all the people that contribute to making our games possible. Can you guys just say thank you to them? Because that matters. When we talk about effort, parents aren't diving on the floor for a loose ball, but they can help volunteer at a youth tournament. They can help with team dinners. And we say if you want to participate in the culture, here are ways that you could express some effort, similar, but still slightly different because of your role as a parent. And then this one's a little bit fuzzy out there, but we talk a lot about love as one of the values of our program, and particularly how we treat each other. So we might have a conversation at a parent meeting about, like, what are the challenges of being a sports parent? And we have them talk about that at the tables and share out a little bit. We might have the players. We've done this before. We've asked players, we sprinkle them out to all the different tables in the room and say, all right, players, what are the best things that parents can do to help you have a great experience this year? And they just share stuff like, don't embarrass me in the stands. Make sure you come to the games. Cheer for the whole team, not just for me. Like, it's an opportunity for players to invite parents in to what an expression of love might look like in the role of a sports parent. Number 2, I mentioned this before, reach out when something's up and we don't need your 7th grade press break. And number 3, also mentioned before, give us the space and encourage your players to have the hard conversations with us. We're going to try to create opportunities for that. Please encourage them to come talk to us rather than have the parent be the advocate all the time. I'm going to skip this slide here. I'm going to go back to the last one here. Okay. Impacted parents. As I mentioned before, this takes a little bit of courage. I don't want this in the room when I'm doing a parent meeting to feel like I'm telling them how to parent their kid. Okay. But at the same time, I'm also like, screw it. I'm going to take a chance here. And so here are 3 challenges that I shared with our parents to try to give them some perspective at our parent meeting last year. I said, look, if we're just being honest, and I'm being really humble talking about how I've experienced this with my own daughters at 7 and 10 years old, one of the challenges of being a sports parent is having a separation between what I'm feeling and how the player is performing. If I'm feeling their performance, that is not healthy. Here's the story I tell them. In this book, The Gift of Failure, they talk about some research here where they surveyed some kids in middle school and they said, when you take a good grade report home, do you feel like you are more loved by your parents? And 90% of middle school kids says, yes, when I go home with good grades, I feel more loved. Well, then they did the same survey with high school students. And you think high school students, they're more mature. They're kind of out on their own a little bit, right? 94%, even more high school students just felt like they were more loved when they brought good grades home. Do you think that that would also be true for their sports performance? Absolutely. I know from my dad, I felt loved when there was a bag of Reese's peanut butter cups on my bed if I played well in a soccer game. Didn't happen all the time, but I knew he was proud of me, not because he told me, but because I played well and I got some candy because of it, right? Like, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think as parents, we need to be a little bit cautious of that to know that, am I just responding to their performance up and down? And that's probably not the best place for me to be. Here's the second challenge I shared with them. I asked them to take responsibility for their influence during and after the game on how our players think about their performance and how they think about their team. I use this quote from Joshua Medcalf at the bottom here that says, a child's inner voice is shaped by the voices they hear most frequently and most intensely. Do you know who that is in a sports experience? It's their parents, usually on the ride home, and it's their coaches. And I have responsibility for that as well. And so the challenge is, if the only voice that your kid heard in their mind during a game or after a game was yours, does that serve them or does that hinder them? It's not always an easy question to answer, but I think it does provide some perspective. And we ask the parents, we tell them, you have the ability to torpedo your son or daughter's experience here by how you process the game. Please do everything you can to uphold the team and the program and let us do the coaching. We want them to take responsibility for their influence. Finally, I share with them this story. These are my kids right here of the conversation that I had with my 10-year-old when she first started playing basketball as an 8-year-old, third grade. I sat Adelaide down and I said, Adelaide, here's how this is going to work. You are in the unique place of living with your coach. You're the only player on the team that has 24/7 access to your basketball coach. And you're the only player on the team that the coach has 24/7 access to. I said, anytime you want to talk to your coach, you can. That's one of the advantages of being the coach's kid. You want to talk about the game, you want to talk about how to get better, you want to work out. We can do that at any time. All you have to do is ask. But in the same way that I can't do that with any other player on the team, I'm not calling up Adelaide's teammates and saying, tell me what you thought about the game. Tell me what you thought about how you played. I said, I'm going to follow the same boundaries with you. So if I ask you on the way home, what'd you think of the game? And you don't want to talk about it, all you have to say is, I don't want to talk about it. And I am not allowed to follow up, and I will not. In other words, Adelaide is in charge of the sports component of our relationship. I'm not going to pressure her. I'm not going to, be overbearing with her. If she wants to talk about it, if she wants to work out, it's all up to her. That's really hard for parents. And that's really hard for me, quite frankly, because there's a lot I'd like to talk about after her games. But this has been a great rule for us to protect our relationship in the context of sports. Here's the last thing. Another way, again, this is passive aggressive, okay? But another way to have impact on parents is to offer to buy them a book. So my first year at Mount Vernon, and I did this at Linn-Mar as well, I read this book called What Made Maddie Run. The short story of the book is it's about this cross-country runner that was a stud in high school, went to the University of Penn, ran track and field and cross-country, and eventually lost her way and took her own life when she was in college. And I kind of tell the short story, and I say, here's the thing that I took away from this book. I don't know what it's like to be a teenage girl today. I don't know what it's like to have social media pressures and what it's like to go through this world because it was so different than the world that I went through as a male, right? But this book gave me more perspective than anything that I've ever read in my life. And so I tell the parents, if you'd like a copy, let me know. And I put a sign-up sheet on the back table when they left. They could write their name down. And when we had our parent practice a week later, I had 18 copies of What Made Maddie Run, and they could just pick them up and walk out the door. Never followed up, never had a conversation. I'm just trying to get this book in their hands if they want it. When I was at Linn-Mar, my third year, before things got sideways, I had a dad come up to me. He said, hey, Mom bought that book, and I thought she was crazy, but she made me read it. And he said, it has changed completely my entire relationship with my daughter. Because he was a coach and a trainer and a guy that wanted to work with her nonstop, and the guy that was badgering her to get up at 6:30 in the morning, and the guy that felt her performance, and the guy that cut the clips, to look at her mistakes in games. And he said, I just never realized what this world was like for these kids. And he said, I want to thank you for giving us the book. That, to me, is a great example of impact. It takes a little courage. It takes a little vulnerability. It takes my willingness to step out a little bit to create opportunities for parents potentially to grow. But as I said, I think it's worth it. Last slide here. This is an email that when I left Springville and took the job at Linn-Mar, Guy Johnson, who was a dad in our program, sent me this email. He said, congratulations, Nate. I can't even imagine how difficult this decision was for you. I would like to wish you the best of luck in the next stage of your journey. I'd also like to thank you for the memories and mentoring you provided for the girls and parents. I can't tell you how often I share the story of the positive impact Springville girls basketball has had on me. The trophies are nice, but it's all the other stuff that will have or has had the biggest impact. I'm so thankful that Sammy had the opportunity to learn from you. Then he says, if you get bored of the big school experience and want to take on another challenge, Mount Vernon, where his other daughter was going at the time, in about 7 years, that'd be a great choice. Oh, the irony, because now Lindy's in 6th grade and I'm working with her in our youth program. And guys, once again, one of the parents in our program. But this, again, ultimately for me, man, I've got a lot of scars on my back from stuff that I've been through as a coach. These are the emails and the reason why I continue to step back into the arena to have a transformational impact or at least influence on the parents that we're working with.
Thanks, Nate. That was awesome. Awesome presentation. Appreciate all of the information and the examples and the things that coaches can use with their own programs. I did put a link to the presentation in the chat. So if anybody that wants to just click on that so you have that available, please do so. If you have any, I know we're running a little late on time here. We don't really have any time limits, but we want to honor everybody's time too. But if you have any quick questions for Nate, put them in the chat right now. We can talk about that a little bit. He just also put his email in the chat that you can easily reach out to him, and also follow him on Twitter or on X. Justin, is there anything that you want to jump in and add here while we wait to see if there's any questions or anything from the chat?
That was great stuff. I did take some notes, but I don't think I'm gonna go through my notes. I think I would just say, Nate, just to the coaches, Nate has developed this over a lot of years, a lot of trial and error, just like all of us coaches who've done it for a long time. Don't feel like you have to take the PowerPoint and do everything that he does. You need to find what works for you, and it might be you take a puzzle piece from here or a puzzle piece from here. But if you try to implement everything because it sounds great, it's probably not going to work. It's got to fit your personality. It's got to fit your administration. Got to fit your team. So I think there were a lot of great things to think about. But just understand, it's not like a copy paste thing. You've got to work through things. And, Nate's coached a long time. He's probably comfortable having some of those longer conversations with parents. You might not be as a young coach, and that is fine. There is nothing wrong with, if you want to have a meeting, I would like to have an administrator there. It doesn't mean that it's going to go bad, but if you really feel like you kind of need a security blanket of an administrator, that's not wrong. And as a young coach in today's day and age, if you even just say, hey, if we're going to have a meeting, we're going to have a player there, we're going to have a parent there, and I would like an administrator there or an assistant coach. Sometimes that in itself just heads off a lot of issues in itself. So,
And, and and I would add to that too. I blind copy RAD on a lot of emails. If there's something where I'm responding to a parent, I'll let him know and I'll just blind copy so he knows what has been communicated in case it gets back to him. So the more you can loop in support, I would much rather overreach for support than get myself in a quagmire and then be playing catch up.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. From sitting in the AD chair for a couple of years, it was difficult to be blindsided by things. It's much easier to support and to give the information that's needed if you know what's going. It's better to over communicate, I think, with your AD and just be open and honest with them and let them know what's going on, than it is to think, oh, maybe it'll go away or maybe nothing will happen, or the AD's not gonna, they're not gonna think highly of me because his parents upset. AD, we all know, we're gonna have parents that are going to be upset or going to have, going to ask questions and stuff at times. And I just loved through the presentation how you talked about the, it's setting expectations from the beginning, and Justin mentioned as a young coach, that's where, establish how you want to do things. And it may change over years and you figure out that, hey, what I had put in as policy isn't really working or isn't something that's really something that I want to follow through with. But having those clear expectations, here's how we do things. Communication, that was another thing. I thought a big theme from what Coach talked about was, how are we communicating and being proactive and being positive with that communication. I always think parents parents don't know. There's a lot of things. We have a lot of parents that come in, it's their first child who's in a high school sport, and they don't know how things work. So the more that we can support them and communicate with them, I think it's a great thing. I mean, I love the resources you share with parents. I always try to do the same thing. I just have something, whether it was an article or it was a story or something that they could relate to. I mean, I'm in a little different position. I don't have kids personally, and I always was upfront with parents and let them know that yes, my perspective isn't the same as yours because I don't have a child of my own, but you know, these kids feel like my own kids, and here's how we're going to treat them, and we want that communication. We want the communication first from the kids, but you know, I'm not going to turn my back to you. I'm gonna come talk to you. I'm gonna listen to you. Love what you said. One of my phrases is listen to understand. You know, when a parent comes in, it's easy to think, to get upset. And sometimes you got to take that deep breath and just slow down and not respond to an email maybe right away. And just take a little bit of time to gather yourself and go, okay, here's what I really want to communicate, and here's what I'm doing. But what is it that they're really trying to say? And sometimes I think we assume that their intentions when they email are bad. You said it with AD calling you to the office. It's we assume that, oh gosh, what did I do or what's bad, and we got to make sure that we're listening to understand, but we're not assuming that they're out to get us. There's something bad. Hopefully we're all in this to try to create great experiences for our kids. And how if we can build that, it's almost a partnership with parents and let them understand that they have a pretty big role to play here, and we're here to work together and support them. Because if their kids are having a great experience, parents are going to have a great experience, and then us as coaches are going to have a great experience. We had a question in the chat. A couple questions. Positive comment. And then any ideas on how to help a young coach learn that the athlete needs the coach, but should also learn how to do individual thinking and deciding too?
Yeah, I think when it comes to, basketball is a game of decisions, right? And so, we probably on the continuum of how much is what we do is coach led and how much is player led or principal based versus scripted by the coach. We're probably about 90% principals and players. And so I think our kids are just used to having to figure things out on their own. I think in practice, there are ways to, like we did a drill tonight. We're working on our zone offense a little bit. So we played 4-on-4 live against a 2-2 zone. So we quickly just talked about how the 2-2 zone would rotate. And then we let the players play and see what they could discover. And so each team got like 3 minutes on offense, 3 minutes on defense, take a timeout. All right, go talk about what worked, what didn't work, what do you want to try differently next time? So we're putting them in situations to be able to, one, make decisions in practice, two, learn from their experiences without necessarily inserting myself, giving them an opportunity to discuss and learn from each other. And we try to do that, in games as well. But yeah, I think it's hard. I remember talking with Kylie Yates about this on the IBCA podcast earlier this summer. And he's like, why would I let them make decisions when I know my decisions are better? And I said, Kylie, it's because I want them to grow. I want them to be autonomous. I want them to find confidence. I want them to potentially find solutions that I haven't found. So I'm going to give them space to do that. And it's hard when he does it because they've never been asked to think before. They're not really sure what to do. So we just keep giving them space. We give them a little bit of nudge. We give them a little feedback, and we let them explore.
I would throw in. I actually thought of this the other night at youth practice. It was 6th grade practice, and we were trying to scrimmage. And I stopped it every 5 seconds to point something out. Oh, we need this, we need that. And I thought, no wonder whenever we make a mistake, we stand there instead of hustling back on defense in a game. Because in practice, I stop it all the time. So I think there's a time where, yes, you need to stop, you need to instruct, but there's also a time where you need to let them make mistakes, and they need to realize why they made the mistake. I used to tell the kids there's 3 phases of learning. One is you make the mistake and you don't know it. Second is make the mistake and you knew it, and the third is you don't make the mistake anymore. So you can tell the kids, hey, you're on level 2 of learning, and they know what it is. So I think just being able to let them fail is kind of hard as a coach because you want to see it and correct it all the time, and sometimes you just got to let them go.
Yeah, that's well said by
Um,
both of you.
th-
Go
there was
ahead.
something I was going to add that I think is important, especially for a young coach. And I was told this a long time ago, and for the most part, I think I did a pretty good job of it. But as a young coach, I would have a pretty steadfast rule about communicating, like coaches communicate with parents right after a game when things are emotional and things are intense. It's okay to say things are a little emotional right now. Why don't you stop in Monday? Or why don't we set something up for later? When the emotions are high for all of us, not just parents, it's usually not a time to get things done. So, in the heat of the moment, right after a game, especially basketball, which can be intense, might not be the best time to engage in a parent because you're not talking them down. So, time and place is important too.
Agreed. Any other questions anybody has or anything else, Nate or Justin, that you have that you wanted to share?
Just appreciate the opportunity to share. And if anybody wants to reach out, my email's in the chat there, coachNsanderson@gmail.com. Again, I've made the PowerPoint available or the slideshow available. There are some links in the notes below the slides as well to some relevant articles. So hopefully that's a good resource for folks. And again, feel free to reach out if there's anything else we could ever do.
Yeah, I think that's the last thing I would say is um, I think it's important for coaches to not feel like, sometimes we feel like we're in kind of a little silo here and we're in our own world and tonight should be a perfect example that, we're all have these similar experiences and there's probably other people, you know, right in this meeting or, close to you who are having similar experiences. So if you've got situations that come up with parents or with players and communication and dealing with them, working with them, reach out, find somebody to reach out to. Obviously, you've got great resources here through this presentation, but I think it's always important to have that person to communicate with, to kind of run ideas by and just kind of know that, okay, maybe I am doing the right thing. I know from working with the mentoring that I'm doing with new coaches, it comes up a lot that they, just need sometimes a sounding board and gee, I don't know if this idea is okay. And if you've got somebody that can share experiences and things that they've gone through, it can certainly make it much easier to kind of navigate through any of these issues that come up.
Yeah, Kurt. And the last thing I'll plug too, just shameless plug for JP's book, but the Sports Parent Solution is easily the most comprehensive resource out there that will take you through, initial stages of thinking about the role of parents to actual practical ideas. It's probably not an in-season read, but if you're looking for something in the off season, it's really good. JP did a great job with it.
So like we had one more question come up in the chat. Do you own evaluations as well?
Evaluations in what sense?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we were talking about the new coaches and what's a good approach to really deal with all the situation and how, I mean, when it comes during the game, after the game, and dealing with parents and communicating out. One thing that I found that it's really helpful to whenever you do the practice, whenever you do or have a game, you do your own assessment and go through the list and ask yourself as well, as you mentioned, what went well, what went not so well, and what needs to be fixed. Sometimes just maybe a few seconds here and there we just released and like sorry, Justin, was it Justin? Yeah, Justin mentioned that stopping the game and just losing that momentum in the practice would delay the learning process of the player as they need to experience. The experience in this sport is the most important thing. So the more experience they have, the more they're going to learn and visualize and have that click as they're on their own and as a part of the team. So back to coach, I think self-assessment is very, very important. So you get more skills with that, and better routine actually when you come to the next practice or next game. Just about that.
Yeah, I was going to just add in, I think self-reflection is a great thing to do for coaches, whether whether it's on your practice schedule, after practice, what worked, what didn't work from a timing standpoint, notes to come back to things that, maybe I want to spend a little bit more time on something as I go, but anytime you can reflect and get feedback. A lot of times that self-feedback is important. If there's ways to get feedback from, if you have assistant coaches, get feedback from them on, hey, what worked, what didn't work, what is something we need to do differently or better for tomorrow, or ask them a specific question. If we're talking about communication, how was my communication with the kids? Do you feel like they understood everything that we were trying to get across? The reflection part should be a huge piece of continuing to build our coaching capacity and making better experiences for kids.
Yeah. Kurt, I got to run here. I'm still at school and I need to get home before bedtime or I'm going to lose out on Father of the Year here. So I appreciate it again. And thanks everybody for staying with us here. And again, reach out if we could ever help you in any way.
Yep. Thanks, Nate. Awesome job.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Justin, thanks for jumping in. And coaches, thanks for being a part of this. We will put this link also. We're recording this and we'll save it and get it to the IGCA YouTube page, hopefully in the next day or two. So you can share it with anybody else that you think might be interested in it. So thanks again, everybody, for coming. And we will plan on the next IGCA webinar